Images. Images are a part of Catholic environment, Catholic culture, Catholic devotion. Images that are shown to us in statues, paintings, portraits, whatever. We have images here, but this church was designed according to the recommendations of the Second Vatican Council, saying newer churches, old churches are beautiful and wonderful, but newer churches should not have any distractions from the sanctuary itself. So there should not be a lot of side altars and statues in the worship space, but they can be anywhere else. And so we don't have anything, I think, distracting from the altar and the ambo or pulpit over there. We do have the 8 tapestries of the Holy Spirit along the inside perimeter of our walls. Then we have a statue of Mary in the lobby and 2 kneelers there. And it's in the lobby because when people come in, that's one of the first things they see. And also perhaps they want to say a rosary or a prayer to Mary, and they come to the church and they find out there's a wedding going on or a funeral or some other service. If that statue is inside the church, they wouldn't be able to go in, or they might go in and disturb the other people who are attending that wedding. So out there, they always have a private place. Exactly the same for our tabernacle. It's in that beautiful Eucharistic chapel there, open from 6:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And even if someone comes and wants to pray before the Blessed Sacrament, and there's something going on in the church, they know they can always pray there quietly. Now, sometimes Catholics are accused of falsely adoring our statues. We adore the statue, or we adore the crucifix, and so on. Of course, we know that's not true. They're simply visible reminders of the people they represent or the events they represent. And we have images everywhere else in our American culture, for sure. My favorite patriotic image of all is in Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial. I just love standing before that huge statue of Abraham Lincoln sitting on that chair, thinking of what a great president he was in a country very divided back then, as sadly it is even today, and how he tried to bring the country back together by ending the Civil War, how he ended slavery, although it took over 100 years to get civil rights passages inside our country itself. But that image is so inspiring to me. We have other images. We have the image of George Washington on our $1 bill. I don't think we adore that dollar bill, although sometimes it's called the almighty buck. And we have this image here. This is a $50 coin, the image of JFK. He's on the heads, and the tails is the American eagle. Again, the $50 coin. So images are part of our culture. What if we had an image of God? Wouldn't it have been great had there been photography invented 2,000 years ago and someone took a picture of Jesus Christ? We saw that image today. Or maybe a painting. Jesus was there sitting in a chair and someone was painting him. But we don't have such an image. The closest we have is the Shroud of Turin, and some debate whether it's real or counterfeit. I've seen the Shroud of Turin, and I don't know whether it's real or counterfeit. It certainly looks like a male who was crucified and crowned with thorns, as you see the bloodstains on that shroud. That's the closest we have of what might be an image of what Jesus looked like. But all the things I just mentioned, the tapestries, the statue, the tabernacle, the crucifix, Abe Lincoln statue, George Washington picture on the dollar bill, Kennedy on the half coin, those are all man-made images. We've created them. There is one image that is God-made. Do you know what that image is? You and you and you and you and you and me. Because the very first book of the Bible, the very first chapter of the Bible, on day 6 of creation, after God had created the birds, everything in the oceans, all the animals, all the insects, then God said, let us make humankind in our image. God made humankind in God's image. God made them male and female. So we are the image of God. So that brings us to the gospel. This young man, called a scribe, meaning he was a student, asked Jesus, what's the greatest of all the commandments? I think he was sincere, because at that time in the Jewish law books, there were 613 commandments. And Jewish scholars were debating all the time, which is the most important? This one or that one? Included the 10 Commandments and many, many other Jewish laws. And so this young man thought, well, I've heard about Jesus. He seems to be a good preacher. He's very popular. I want to get his opinion. What's the most important commandment of all? Jesus quoted Moses that we heard in the first reading today from Deuteronomy. That was written 1,400 years before Christ. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The first commandment. Moses said the same thing. Those words are called the Shema, and they're, as we heard in the introduction, they're placed on the doorpost of Jewish homes in kind of a slanted little container. And when Jewish people enter the home, they kiss it like that, to say that as I leave the home, as I go back to home, I need to be a loving person. That's the most important thing of all. But interestingly enough, Jesus did not stop with one. The scholar didn't say, give me the two, give me a few. He said one, but Jesus couldn't stop with one. He had to say, the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. You see, it's like two sides of a coin. I have this coin here. Heads is JFK's picture. Tails is the American eagle. So Jesus is saying, if we're talking about loving God, the flip side of that is you have to love your neighbor, because your neighbor is made in God's image. If we love God, wouldn't we love an image of God? And we are images of God, as it says right there in Genesis. I quote again, God made humankind in God's own image and likeness. Now, to say that you are in the image of God does not mean that God looks like you. God forbid. Or me, even worse. But it's a spiritual image. And what does a spiritual image mean? God is love. If we are made in God's image of God, then we are called to be lovers. We're called to be lovers, to love God, to love our neighbor. So I want you to do something now. It may seem a little bit silly. I'm going to try it and see what happens. You can throw me out if you don't like it. I want you to turn to the person next to you, around you, behind you, in front of you, right and left. Say at least to one person, you are the image of God. Go for it. Okay, you spoke the gospel truth. May seem silly, a lot of giggles, but that is the truth. You are the image of God, and therefore we are meant to love God and all God has created, especially the only part of creation. Not animals, not clouds, not mountains, not rivers. Nothing else was made in the image of God except human beings. And so Jesus said, you must love your neighbor. There's a quote from the first letter of John that makes this very clear. John wrote this maybe 40, 50 years after Christ. If anyone says, I love God, but hates his brother or sister, he is a liar. For whoever does not love a brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. Doesn't that make sense? Yeah, we don't see God, we say we love God, but we see our brothers and sisters everywhere. How can we say, well, I love God, but I don't like people? No. Now, I realize some people, we're like oil and water. Sometimes we don't mix. But it doesn't mean you can hate them. It doesn't mean you can return evil for evil. To love everyone, and that's difficult. So I challenge you today, this afternoon, tomorrow, look for an opportunity to be a loving person to someone else. It could be as close as your spouse, your parents, your children, your siblings. Maybe someone that you haven't said I love you to in a long time. Maybe someone you don't even know. Maybe someone on 215. Yeah, that's the place where there's least love in this community. But, wouldn't it be nice to be a nice driver in traffic? Maybe someone in the grocery store, maybe someone at school. Look for an opportunity, something you haven't yet planned, today or tomorrow, Tuesday at the latest, to do some loving act to another person. To say I love you, the words could be cheap, to follow that with actions. A helping hand, a compliment, letting them cry on your shoulder, listening to their woes, their stories, their problems, bringing them a meal if they're homebound and sick and maybe just got home from the hospital, whatever. That's what we're asked to do. If you love God, and I presume we're all here because we love God, then you must love your neighbor. But wait a minute. I think Jesus really gave 3 commandments. He said, love God with all your heart, mind, strength, understanding. Love your neighbor as yourself. That means you have to love yourself. So back to the coin. We have the heads and tails, and maybe the rim of the coin is loving yourself. That means take care of yourself. Get proper sleep, proper nutrition. Even pamper yourself once in a while. Go to a spa, go to a movie, have fun. Love yourself. How can you love others if you don't like yourself? So it starts out there. You know, there's a retreat for Gorman students, freshmen and sophomores, called QUEST. And the acronym used for that retreat is JOY. The acronym JOY stands for Jesus, others, you. That's the whole package. Love Jesus, love others, love yourself. Great challenges in this simple gospel today. Love God with your whole being. Love your neighbor, love yourself. That's what love is all about.